My guest today is Cyndi Hutchins, Director of Financial Gerontology at the Bank of America. Welcome to GRUFFtalk, Cyndi.
Thanks, Barbara. How are you today?
I'm good. And we were just chatting before. We both are, kind of doing this from home. And we have our dogs with us, but nobody knows that because they're so quiet and well behaved,
Unless they
right?
make an appearance.
Okay, we have to all know this. What is a financial gerontologist? What is that?
It sounds a lot more complex than it is, actually. A gerontologist is really just someone who studies aging and all of the different topics around aging and longevity. Financial is obvious, right? So when we marry the two, it's really the study of finances and planning your finances during a longer life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you were a top financial, because I love this story. I love to hear about pivots in careers in life. You were a top financial planner for many years, and then you decided to, I think I want to go back to school and become a gerontologist. Yeah. And then you went back to Bank of America, although you may have been at Bank of America while you're in school. Yeah. I don't know that. You'll fill us in. And then you became the first director of financial gerontology. Right. This is amazing. And then created this whole department. So tell us what's the backstory here?
So you mentioned I had been a financial advisor. I was a financial advisor for 20 years. Somewhere during my extended midlife crisis, I decided I had enough of financial advising, and I took on a position within Bank of America as a retirement specialist. And our job was to cover territory. I covered Washington, D.C., Maryland, Northern Virginia, and work directly with financial advisors to help them with retirement planning for their clients. Now, during that period of time, and I did that for 10 years. So now we're 30 years into financial services. And I had noticed as I was working hand in hand with these clients that the questions that they were asking were very different than the questions that they asked when I first got into the business in the late 80s. And I realized that all of these questions were around planning for a longer life, planning for a longer retirement. And so I decided to go back to school. I went and earned a master's degree at the University of Southern California's Davis School of Gerontology, and really just to serve my clients better, answer their questions better, educate financial advisors better on the things that they needed to be thinking about that had changed that they might not know about. While I was doing that, I received a phone call from the head of our line of business at Bank of America. It was Merrill. It was the Merrill line of business at the time. And he said, I heard about what you're doing. And when you graduate, we have a role for you. And so it was as easy as that. I mean, it just literally fell into my lap.
Well, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I'm very grateful because we had very forward-thinking leadership. And, they were recognizing that longevity is changing everything. And
everything.
Yeah. And so I've been in this role now since 2013.
So I'm curious, do you think, or do you know, is this the only company that has, the only bank that has a director of financial gerontology? Or is this becoming more common now?
As far as I know, we kind of thought that we had maybe a 3-year window where people would start, other companies would start to emulate what we had done.
This brilliant idea.
And to my knowledge, there's no one else on Wall Street that has created a role like mine or that does the type of research activity that we do. So
research around longevity and planning for retirement. Yeah. It's really so smart.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I applaud you, of course, for making that very smart pivot. And also I really applaud the leadership of Bank of America for, making that phone call to you that time and saying, this is a great opportunity for us to help our clients, our growing client base who are living longer. So we've been hearing a lot about longevity literacy. What is that, Cyndi? And why is it impacting how people plan for and really think about retiring?
This really goes back, Barbara, to the what I said a couple of minutes ago about the questions that people were asking had changed. Longevity literacy is really just the understanding that people are living longer. When you think about this, we've added 10 years of life expectancy just since 1950, and we're adding 1 month for every year that goes by. So longevity literacy would be the awareness, the realization that most people are likely to live longer than they would have expected, or what their parents could expect or their grandparents could expect. And then when we put that on top of planning, it's really just the marriage of understanding you're living longer and then figuring out how to plan for that longer life.
What you will really need so that you have a good life.
Yeah, you want to minimize the surprises, right? So that's
absolutely
what we would be trying to do.
I'm a big believer in planning and planning for like scenario planning, which is something I learned back when I was in the business world. That's really critical. And I think that has a big part in planning for your future as you get older, no question. So the good news is we are living longer, as you just pointed out. The tricky thing is that not everyone is, kind of financial literate, and they're not really planning appropriately. So they're not really focused enough. So how do you think this kind of expansion of life, the expansion of the lifespan has really changed how people are planning for retirement, and specifically how they're planning for their finances?
So let me answer this question with a story, if you could indulge me for a minute. It's the story of my grandmother. My grandmother passed away about 10 years ago. She was 96. Now, she retired when she was 55. So if you do the math on that, she lived in retirement for 41 years. Now, had you asked her how long she thought she'd live in retirement, she'd have said 10 or 15 years, because at that time, if you lived into your 70s, it was considered to be a really good long life. So she never, I have to think she had things that she wanted to do in her life after she retired, right? She had to have some kind of bucket list, even if it was short. But she seemed to live every year as if she thought it was going to be her last year. And she lived it as if she was old. And she wasn't. And she was very physically, mentally, and emotionally capable. So she really had no limitations, but she never left the city of Baltimore from the day she retired until the day she passed away. So I have to think, had she known she had 41 years in retirement, she would have planned differently. Maybe she would have worked a little longer. Maybe she would have saved more money. As it was, she retired from the federal government and she lived off her pension. I'm sure they didn't expect it, but she lived off her pension for 41 years. So,
wow.
That in and of itself is a great illustration of, we better think about this longer life. Because I don't think there's anybody out there that wants to spend 41 years watching television, sitting on the couch.
No, kind of languishing.
Right, eating snacks or whatever it might be. And even people always say, oh, I'm going to retire and play golf. Even if you're a golfer, if that's all you do for 41 years, that's probably not how you would have expected to spend your retirement. So that life expectancy has forced us to look at different issues, not the least of which is how are we going to spend our time. And so that's really how the face of retirement has changed and how planning has changed. And then when we look at the finances of it all, we have to think about the things you want to do, think about what that's going to cost, and then plan for that. It's no longer just living off your pension and just taking your cruise and then you pass away.
Right. Oh, that's a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And it's very illustrative of exactly the points you're making now. What are some of the key challenges, Cyndi, that we might face in retirement and aging in general? And what's the best way to prepare to meet these challenges? So
there's two that rise to the top. So if I think about the questions that I get from people, it's these two issues that are the most provocative and the most in the forefront of their minds. One is healthcare and how to plan for healthcare costs, and the other is caregiving So either you're going to be a caregiver or you will need a caregiver. And so how do I plan for those two things? Let's take healthcare costs first.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with planning for healthcare and healthcare costs in retirement, well, I see the problem is threefold, right? Number one, we don't know what it's going to cost. Number two, we don't know what the contingencies that we need to plan for along the way are going to be. We don't know what health conditions might arise and when that might happen. And number three, and perhaps the most important, is we don't know when we're going to die. So we don't have a time horizon. We don't know if we need to plan for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, or even beyond that. And so that's a major one. But we also know about healthcare costs that they're on the rise. They're rising at a rate that's double that of inflation, notwithstanding this current inflationary environment we're in, but double the average inflation, which typically over the last decades has been about 2.5%. So we know that they're rising at a rate that's double that of inflation. We know that healthcare costs go up as we age. So think about this. If you're a healthy 65-year-old and you live 15 years till you're the age of 80, you are going to spend about $115,000 in out-of-pocket money for your medical care over and above what Medicare covers. If you live one more decade, it's a huge number. Now, if you live one more decade, remember 115,000 for the first 15 years. But if you live one more decade, that number goes to about 250,000. And then if you live to be 100, first of all, God bless you, but you're going to spend about $450,000 over that 35-year time frame in out-of-pocket medical expenses over and above what Medicare covers. Remember, Medicare only covers a little more than 60% of our health care. It does not cover vision. It does not cover hearing. It does not cover dental. Now think about that for a minute. What's the first three things that go when you get older? It's your eyes, your ears, and your teeth.
I know.
And Medicare.
Yeah. I know. For me, it's definitely my eyes. My eyes are going.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
yes.
I'm wearing glasses.
This is key.
Yeah. So that's key. Then you throw in there caregiving, which could, if you are providing that care over the course of your working years or even into your retirement for an elder loved one, that could, number one, cost you money out of pocket because many, many caregivers are financial contributors to the care of an elder loved one. And that's to the tune of about $7,000 a year on average. It could also cause you to separate from work for a period of time, if not permanently. Remember, the number one reason that people leave their jobs sooner than expected is an illness, and it might not be their own. So
Correct.
When we think about those two things and becoming a caregiver, that can have a huge detrimental effect on your ability to put money away for yourself, especially during your peak earning years, which is when you're more likely to be a caregiver. Then you have to think about your own care needs as you get older. If I need long-term care, where am I going to receive it? How much is it going to cost? Who's going to provide that care? Is it going to be family members? All of those things that you have to think about as you live into your 80s and beyond, because those are the people, typically that's the demographic that's going to need care.
Right. What are some of your best tips that you can share to help GRUFFtalk listeners manage investment risk and ensure that there is kind of a steady income stream after they retire?
Yeah. So first of all, we need to be very aware that most people no longer have pensions, right? So if you're working for the government, you're fortunate to have a pension. But most people that are working in the private sector or in nonprofits, they don't have pensions. So almost 100% of the responsibility for our income in retirement falls on us personally, right? So that's through saving in your 401k. That's the number one thing I would tell people to do. Max out your 401k. If you can't max it out, at least be contributing to the extent that your employer matches. Don't leave that money on the table. So that's number one. Don't take loans from your 401k. Don't take early withdrawals from your 401k. That is retirement money. Set it and forget it. And if you are in your 20s just starting out, if you're in your 30s just starting out, and you do that, you max out that 401k, you're going to have plenty of money by the time you retire, even with dramatic swings in the market. Over time, we know that you will end up on the upside if you are investing, and especially the way you do it with a 401k through dollar cost averaging, because you're putting money in when the market is high, you're putting money in when the market is low, and you end up averaging out with a profit. So that's number one. No,
I've encouraged both of my daughters who are in their 20s and working to do that.
Yeah.
Through their companies.
Yeah,
My so thank you for that tip. That's a great tip.
It really is. My daughter's 33 now. She's just had her first child, and her and her husband are both contributors to their 401k. And she shows me her statement at the end of every year. And she's like, Mom, look, this is so great. So I'm like, well, Mom, there's a little something sometimes. But the other thing is, if you are offered a health savings account through your employer, max that out to the degree that you can. With a health savings account, you get a triple tax benefit. It goes in pre-tax out of your paycheck. It grows tax deferred. And when you take it out, if you use it for health care, it is tax free. So that's a great way to save for your long-term care, or even just your healthcare needs after you retire, your deductibles, your copays in Medicare, all of those types of things. Those expenses that I mentioned that you're going to pay out of pocket, you can use your HSA for those sorts of things. So that's the other thing. And then, so with that, I always kind of use the term pay yourself first, because that's coming out of your paycheck. You won't notice it if and you won't spend it. It's easy as that. Now, I'll get from young people a lot of times, well, I just can't afford that. And, you think maybe it's $25 a pay or $50 a pay. And I have to say to them, look, it's pizza and beer on a Friday night. Give up one Friday night per pay and do it. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it. So that's the biggest thing. Now, in terms of ensuring your income in retirement and mitigating risk, which I think was the first part of your question.
Yes.
I would suggest that as you've built that nest egg and you're starting to think about income planning for your retirement, number one, don't overextend your risk. I know we all want to make a lot of money and we all want to do it as quickly as we possibly can, but don't overextend your risk. What I mean by that is, if you are 10 years from retirement, you've got a 10-year time horizon to when you're going to start to need to use that money. So you want to make sure you're paring back the risk. Maybe you're investing in income producing bonds, for instance, or an annuity with some kind of income benefit that will guarantee you an income stream in your retirement. Maybe it's CDs. I'm product agnostic. I don't care what it is. That's between you and your financial advisor. But start to pare back your risk so that you are more conservative, and extremely conservative by the time you're, say, 2 to 4 years before retirement. And and make sure that you're working hand in hand with a financial advisor who can advise you on your own specific goals, so that they can put the pieces in place to make sure that you have a high likelihood of achieving those goals. So that's sort of like a very high level advice for everybody kind of thing. So with that.
Hey, Cyndi, do you have an opinion about long-term care insurance?
I do. I think, unfortunately, long-term care insurance has priced itself right out of most people's budget, right? If you're using, now I look at a couple of different kinds of long-term care insurance. One is the traditional type of long-term care that works like your car insurance or your homeowner's insurance. It's like or a term life policy. You put the money in, you're paying for a benefit. It's there for you when you need it. But when the term of the policy runs out, or if you decide you can't afford it anymore, you don't need it anymore, all that money stays with the insurance company. You get no benefit, right? So that's number one.
Right.
So that is not a good way to go for people that don't want to put money into something for a benefit that they might never use. Now,
Right.
that's also the type of long-term care insurance that has become extremely pricey. They have the ability to raise the rate at any time. And I'll give you an example. I handle my mother's long-term care insurance. And about 7 years ago, maybe even longer now, they came back and they said, okay, we're going to raise your premium. By the way, they wanted to double it. Yes.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to double your premium, or you can give up your cost of living increase, either one. And so we gave up the cost of living increase. So I'm not thrilled about those types of policies. And again, they are exorbitantly expensive.
Especially as you get older.
Yes.
The older you get,
the older
correct?
you get,
the more expensive it is. If you finally decide at 65, ooh, I better catch up and get one of those policies, it's even more expensive.
It's just out of the realm of possibility for most people. There are also hybrid insurance policies. Now, these are policies that are offered by certain insurance companies that are a combination of long-term care insurance and life insurance. So you pay them typically a lump sum, but there are some companies where you can pay a certain number of payments, maybe 5 payments over 5 years, 10 payments over 10 years, something like that. And depending on how much money you put in, you are purchasing X dollar amount of long-term care insurance, and you are purchasing X dollar amount of life insurance. So if you don't need the long-term care insurance, when you pass away, your beneficiaries can receive what you put in or what the value of that life insurance is as a life insurance payment. The nice thing about these policies is most of them will give you your money back if you decide you no longer want the insurance. So that's a nice benefit. What you've given up there is the growth that you might have had on that money otherwise. But you're not giving up. If you put $50,000 in it, you're not giving up $50,000. You can get that money back should you need it. So, and the other thing about those types of policies is the underwriting is much less rigorous than it would be with that traditional long-term care insurance. That's another drawback of the traditional insurance is that unless you're really, really healthy, you can't get it anyway because they underwrite it even more strictly than they underwrite life insurance in many cases. And then the other one is self-insuring, which is you're putting money away on your own. That's one way you can use an HSA is to put the money into the HSA, let it grow however you invest it within the plan. And then it'll be there you can earmark that for your long-term care needs and it'll come out tax-free.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't know anything about this hybrid policy, so thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So what are some of the common misconceptions about retirement planning, and how can longevity literacy help everyone to make better financial decisions?
I think the most common misconception is that you don't need to plan for long-term care. Medicare is going to cover it. Medicare does not cover it. Medicare will cover up to 100 days of long-term care if and only if you're going to get better. So it has to be following a hospital stay, and the care has to be rehabilitative in nature. So here's what I mean by that. You go into the hospital, you have, you've taken a fall, you've fractured your hip.
Yeah, let's use my mother as an example. She passed away in 2021, but what caused the kind of like her death was expedited because she fell and broke her hip. And then, of course, she did have to go into rehab.
And something that women need to think about much more than men because of osteoporosis. So, when we fall at an older age, we are much more likely to break a major bone, and in all likelihood, our hip. So let's say you break your hip, you go into the hospital, you spend at least 3 days in the hospital. Then you are discharged and you are sent to a rehabilitation center for recovery and therapy. Medicare will cover up to 100 days of that rehabilitative long-term care, but you have to go home in order for them to cover it. So that long-term care facility can't be your last stop. So if you are going into a long-term care facility and that's going to be for the rest of your life, Medicare won't cover it. So that's the number one misconception. We need to plan for long-term care. And the other misconception is that Medicare covers it, so we don't need to worry about it. So understand that Medicare doesn't cover it, and understand that you need to plan for it. And you need to plan for it as a family.
Do you have absolutely as a family, a question about that? Do you have an opinion about supplemental insurance, supplemental to Medicare?
So we're talking about original Medicare with the Part F supplemental, like we see on the commercials, right, for United Healthcare and so forth. Yes. I think you should have it. I think you absolutely should have it. But most of those supplemental insurance plans, keep in mind, still don't cover long-term care. But what they do cover is all of the things that Medicare does not cover. So the vision, the dental, the hearing that I mentioned, your deductibles, your co-pays. And by the way, Medicare is not free. For your Part B coverage, which is your doctor's coverage, there is a monthly premium that's going to come out of your Social Security, and there is a copay.
Yes, I actually learned a great deal about all of this specifically because, like you said, I believe you're handling a lot of your mother's finances, it sounds like, and other things, as I did for my mother for many years. And then I saw, of course, how the system worked with the monthly payment being deducted from her Social Security monthly payment, but we did find that her supplemental insurance, and in this case, it was like an AARP United Healthcare. It really was very beneficial to her.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that much money each month. And we found that it was really, for all of the medical issues that she had, it really was a very good benefit. So I kind of encourage people to look into that to see if it works for them.
Yeah, and I would tell you, Barbara, just one side note on that. Well, two side notes. In case my mother is watching, I don't handle her finances. So.
Oh, sorry. That was a terrible presumption on my part.
It would be funny if she was watching, and then I'll get that phone call and say, "Since when do you handle my finances?" But the other thing that I did want to comment on is that you can go, if you want to take out supplemental insurance, go on to Medicare.gov, which is the Medicare website. There is a place in there that has a plan finder. Your supplemental insurance is handled kind of at a local level. So you'll go in and you will put in your zip code and you'll say, I need supplemental insurance. You put in your zip code and it will spit out for you a cafeteria menu of benefits that are available. You'll check the benefits that you want, and then it will tell you who in your area offers those benefits and at what price. And so if the price is too high, then you can go back and say, well, this benefit would be nice to have, but I don't really need it. Take it out, see what the price would be then. And so you can tailor that insurance to your budget.
Yeah, that's really brilliant. And thanks for pointing that out. Really important. When I knew that we had scheduled this episode together, I put it out there on social media and I said, do you have any questions for Cyndi Hutchins from Bank of America? And a few came in. I mean, they actually flooded in, and there were a few, right. There were a few things, that came up. For example, but the number one most asked question, I kind of put them all together into one, is how do you know when it's time to retire? How do you know? Is there an ideal time? Does it depend upon how much money you have saved? And what are some of the other major considerations? So I consolidated all of the questions, but that was really it. How do I know? How do I know?
Let me try
Cyndi?
to unpack that just a little bit.
Okay.
How do you know when it's time to retire? You'll know. And I like to say that for me personally, if I just can't seem to drag myself out of bed in the morning, I have no motivation to go to work and do my job, or I have something in my head that I would like to do that I just didn't have the time to do when I was chasing my career, raising my family, Then I would think about retirement. The other obvious consideration is the financial consideration. So that's why I say you want to make sure that you're not just depending on Social Security in order to have an income stream in retirement. And so, yeah, if you have not saved enough, it's probably not time to retire. And it's never too late to start that savings. But understand that Social Security is not supposed to be your only income source. And so if it is, it's probably not time to retire, because you're not going to retire very well. But there's other considerations that you want to think about other than the financial. I would tell you one is, and these are all very individual considerations, but think about for yourself, what role does work play in your life? Does it define you? Does it give you joy? Does it give you purpose? And so if you're thinking about retiring and your work does define you, it does give you joy, it does give you purpose, think about how you're going to replace that in retirement. And if you can't think of a way to replace it and you're still physically capable of working and mentally capable of working, keep working. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing that says you have absolutely got to retire. Once you do retire, though, or as you're contemplating it, you want to think about how are you going to stay engaged? How are you going to stay challenged? How are you going to avoid isolation and loneliness? We know, by the way, that the number one accelerator of symptoms of cognitive decline, and especially Alzheimer's disease, is social isolation and loneliness. If we didn't ever learn it, we learned it during the pandemic. And so you want to make sure that you have a way to stay purposeful, stay challenged, stay connected, and that will allow you to live a much healthier retirement. Some other issues that you want to think about: where are you going to live? Are you going to stay in the house that you currently live in? Are you going to relocate? Are you going to upsize? Are you going to downsize? Are you going to move near your children and your grandchildren? All of those types of things. By the way, we're finding that a lot of older adults are moving to college towns so that they can earn degrees in retirement, which I just think is just fabulous. And then you want to think about, and all of these decisions need to be made before you retire. You want to think about who's going to take care of you in the event that you need it. Are you in a community that has accessible public transportation for seniors in case you can no longer drive? Are you close to the medical facilities that you're going to need? Are you close to social activities? Is it a community that embraces seniors and has senior activities dedicated to them? And then finally, how will you spend your leisure time? I'll end these comments just on one note here, and that is that one of the first series of studies that we set out to do at Bank of America was around what we call the 7 life priorities. And those priorities are your home, your health, your family, your work, how you spend your leisure time, how you give both to your family and to your community, and for your finances. And so I would tell you, as you're starting to contemplate retirement, and even as you're moving through your retirement, think about those 7 life priorities and how you can fulfill the goals around them as you move to and through your retirement.
Oh, wonderful answer,
Thank
Cyndi.
you.
And I'm going to have links to as much of that as I can get. Maybe you can send me a link to the 7 stages I think are so wonderful. Those are priorities and should be in everyone's life. And I'd like to give our listeners even more information. In fact, knowledge is power, right? So let's guide the GRUFFtalk audience to the best resources out there so they can stay informed and up to date on the latest developments and longevity and literacy and retirement planning and really everything. What do you recommend? What do you say to people that they should they read the Wall Street Journal every day? I mean, what else?
Well, I think that AARP puts out some wonderful articles just on aging and longevity.
Absolutely.
We have some great research. We've done research around caregiving. We've done research around longevity. We've done a lot of research around women and financial wellness. We have a couple of great reports. I don't want to front run them, so I'm not going to mention them, but we have a couple of great reports that are coming out this year that we've worked with other institutions, as you're well aware, to develop. And so our research is very good. AARP has a lot of great articles. If you're interested in something specific like caregiving, for instance, the Family Caregiver Alliance has a lot of nice work that's free that you can get online. Also, if you're thinking about cognitive decline or someone in your family is starting to show signs and symptoms of decline, the Alzheimer's Association has great support and great reading and all of those sorts of things for not just the Alzheimer's patient, but for their caregiver as well and their families.
For the caregivers.
So I think that's really important. And then if there is a particular topic around longevity, just Google it. All of that will come up. It's amazing what the internet has to offer now. So
yeah, now everyone can also use Chat GPT, GPT, I should say.
Exactly.
And have it all written out for you.
Exactly. For however long it lasts, right?
Yeah, exactly right. It's really heating up now, isn't it? People looking at it a little bit too much. But so, Cyndi, this has been an amazing conversation. So helpful, incredible tips, wonderful information, actionable information. But, and it was a lot of information too. Yeah. So before we let you go, what are your 3 biggest takeaways you really want the GRUFFtalk audience to remember from our conversation today?
The first is maximize your 401k. Your HSA, get some good advice around when to take your Social Security because it's not as obvious as one might think. 401k maximization, HSA, maximize your Social Security when it does come time to take it. Talk with a trusted advisor to get some advice on when that time would be. Plan for long-term care. Plan for your own care. Plan for your spouse's care or partner's care, and plan for your elder loved one's care. Make sure you have that conversation as a family. Have it early before a need for care arises, because when you're starting to try to make those decisions and you've got an emergency situation, those decisions are going to be emotionally charged, and they're probably not going to be the best, well thought out decisions that you can make. So plan early for long-term care. Plan often. What do I mean by plan often? Our lives are dynamic. People's situations change. So make sure that you're revisiting that care plan. I like to say every 6 months with all of the stakeholders, your children, any other family members that might be involved, your spouse, all of those stakeholders should have a part in that planning. And then finally, longevity presents a lot of challenges, right? And we've mainly discussed the challenges, but also embrace the opportunities that longevity offers to you, because as I mentioned with the 7 life priorities, you can lead a very fulfilling 20, 30, 40 year or longer retirement if you think about what lights you up, what is going to keep you young in your mind, in your body, and in your spirit. And so those are all opportunities that longevity presents, and we don't want to lose sight of those.
Thank you so much, Cyndi. All of this information is going to help everyone, including me, to age better. So I really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back again.
Absolutely.
This conversation was fun. And say hello to your dogs and your cat for me.
I will do that.
from my dog, Pete.
And your cat.
Thank you so much.